Today at pre-polling, the no lady giving out vote no information said she was a no because she didn't want to pay reparation and rent. Is this true if yes wins?
No.
Absolutely not. There's a whole lot of misrepresentations being made about this referendum. We're going to lose backyards. We're going to return to those old lies from the Mabo days. They're being regurgitated in this referendum campaign when really we're talking about an advisory committee in the Constitution which advises the Parliament and the government on policies and laws relating to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. And of course, I hear all the time these misrepresentations. Ordinary Australians are being subjected to them in social media, in conversations all around the country. They're completely misrepresentative of the truth.
What sort of misrepresentations have you heard? Like directly to you from voters?
Oh, you know, that this is going to destroy our constitutional structure and everything else. The fact is that this is a very safe referendum. This is a safe proposal. It upholds the Constitution while at the same time recognising Indigenous people. This has been subject to a lot of due diligence by including some High Court judges, including 2 former Chief Justices of the Court. The aim from day one was to produce a constitutionally safe proposal. This has been an aim for 11 years now. It was like the first design principle for this amendment was constitutional safety, because we knew that if we didn't uphold the Constitution, we wouldn't get the support of the Australian people. And so we've devised a referendum question that upholds the Constitution whilst recognising Indigenous people.
I just want to go back to you. Because you say the no lady at the polling booth. Did you talk to her? What sort of claims did she make?
I did talk to her, and she said she was a migrant. It was interesting with the first question.
Yeah.
She said she was a migrant. She came to this country and worked very hard, and she didn't want to lose everything. She felt like she was going to lose everything she's worked hard for, like a house. And I know family members also, with the Scare campaign, are saying we're going to have to pay extra rates, $3,500 rates a year. So there is quite a lot of, I guess, fear and misinformation that people, and this lady was genuinely fearful that that was going to happen.
Dan Tehan, you're on the no side of the debate. Does it worry you to hear that there are people on booths saying things like that?
Look, I think one of the things we've got to do is make sure that we have a respectful debate. This is a significant change to our Constitution.
Do you agree that that's wrong, that that's inaccurate?
Look, I haven't heard what the lady said, but if what
reparations?
What we have heard is people on the yes side but previously have talked about the need for reparations. Now, that obviously gets mixed up, but I think the point and where we
deliberately gets mixed up,
well,
doesn't it?
I mean, I don't know the lady, I don't know the background, I don't know the context of what she was saying, but the point I would make here, and I think this is the really important point, is if we had have had proper bipartisanship right through this process, we wouldn't be at the stage where we are, where we're hearing things, and it's from the yes side and from the no side. If we had had proper bipartisanship, we wouldn't be where we are, and that, I think, is the great shame about the debate at the moment, because if we had had the process, we had had a constitutional convention, if we had have made sure that both sides of the major political parties, and we knew this and the Prime Minister should have known this, the Labor Party have put forward 25 changes to our Constitution.
It was a process that your previous government had.
But this is an important point, Patricia. The Labor Party put forward 25 changes to our Constitution. 24 of those have failed. The only one that's been successful was one which had true bipartisanship, which was about giving social security to every Australian. That was the one that was successful. Now, the Prime Minister knew that, and he should have proceeded with caution to make sure that we had bipartisanship, that we had both sides of politics in a position where they could support this.
But Dan, if you have the National Party walk away even before any conversation began, the idea of a bipartisan approach was completely out the window because the Nationals walked even before any of this process began. So let's not lose some history here. You know, once they walked away, that made it enormously difficult. And let's even go back further. When Ken Wyatt was the Minister for Indigenous Australians, he took to your cabinet twice, the direction that your cabinet should go in supporting the Uluru Statement from the Heart, through the reports by Professor Marcia Langton and Tom Calma. So this journey has been quite a long one for First Nations people. And I do think that Australians need to keep in mind that people walked away from this well before the process began. And of course we would have wanted bipartisanship, there's no doubt about that. And we still do. It's still not too late for them to turn around now and vote yes.
I want to go back to the question from Ian about, and it doesn't really matter, but who this person is, but the person claiming reparations and this kind of fear. Does that concern you that these things are being said?
No.
Why doesn't it concern you?
Because if you're consuming news online, in the paper, you know, there are yes campaigners saying this is about treaty and reparations. They're on the referendum working group. So you're saying it's fair game? No, I think it's unfortunate. You know, I don't think it's the sort of debate that we wanted to have as a country. But in the absence of bipartisan support, you know, when there's confusion around what do the words mean, you know, and the executive government. But you know, people are very concerned, and it's not just the official campaigns, because there are so many advocates for and against out there. It's not like we're sticking to our party lines. OK, so you think it's fair enough that a campaigner can say things like that and that's just fair game? I think it's understandable how it's happened and where that individual handing out a card may have picked up her information. Isn't it the role of leading no campaigners to say, well, that's not correct, but we oppose it for, you know, whatever reasons they want to put forward? I'm not a part of the campaign, so I don't know. Pia?
I mean, I think I was looking at your Instagram and the last post you had was, if you don't know, say, you know, if you don't know, vote no. And I just find some of that rhetoric quite disappointing. I don't think it's any surprise that the only person representing the arts tonight is obviously in favour of the voice, because I think that what the problem is that there's so much, well, I don't want to say shouting and screaming, but there's so much misinformation and there's so many people talking, and I don't think enough people are listening. We need to really listen, because this is a really important moment in our country, and this is going to be part of our history regardless. And so it's up to us to decide what message we're going to send to not only to the Indigenous people of our country, but also to our children. Like, what kind of country do we want to live in? Because reconciliation should be a uniting event. And I find it disappointing when you have things like very simple catchphrases like, if you don't know, say no. If you don't know, vote no. I think it would be just actually a better thing to go, if you don't know, here's some information and clear information that I'm going to give you, you know?
I saw that post too.
But what you've got to understand is what's behind that, because Noel himself...
An advertising campaign.
But Noel himself suggested that it would be much better if we had had the legislation produced about 12 months or 18 months before we went to a referendum, so we had a sense as to what a voice would look like. The area that I represent in Western Victoria, there will be supposedly 2 representatives from Victoria. We don't know what representation there would be from Western Victoria. We don't know whether we would have representation at all. It could come from Melbourne. Melbourne
You're a
has
parliamentarian,
the
so you'd be able to
population.
design it.
No, I wouldn't be able to design it.
You would be able to.
because-
There'd be a joint committee.
No, there would be a joint committee, but where do the numbers lie on the joint committee? They lie with the Labor Party. So ultimately, in the end, as we saw with the committee process leading up to the final words, you know, we put forward 3 very sensible suggestions as to how it could be improved, and yet they were just outrightly rejected.
I know something about the numbers, and in the Senate, the government doesn't have the numbers, so it would need you or the Greens. So you could actually construct it with the government and deliver them the numbers and have a big say.
No, but Patricia...
that is the numbers.
No, the numbers on the committee are very different to the numbers in a Senate.
But to get it through, the structure, you would have a lot of power in the Senate.
Well, I mean, you have power in the Senate ultimately if you have the numbers in the Senate. Now, we don't have the numbers in the Senate. And the government...
With the government, you would.
Well, with the government, and if the government practiced true bipartisanship, so when they set up the committee, would they have equal numbers of Liberal and Labor on the committee?
Dan,
no, they wouldn't. So
I think
it's sort
you're
of...
missing the point, mate. This
Tell me how I'm missing the point.
This is what the provision says.
Yeah.
The Parliament shall have the power to make laws. The Parliament shall have the power to make laws. It's like that social welfare legislation, right? That was passed by the Australian people. All of the legislation that was generated under that provision was not known at the time the referendum passed. We passed rafts of social welfare legislation under that power in the many decades since then. We're just talking about a constitutional power as opposed to the legislation. The legislation is your responsibility as a parliamentarian, and Malarndirri's responsibility as a parliamentarian to create the legislation after the referendum is secured. And not only that, in 5 years' time, you can change it. You have a full power to repeal it and replace it. That is the role of the Parliament. Parliament's responsible for the details, and that detail is in legislation that you guys pass. So you can propose a model today and say there's going to be 24 members, but you have a complete ability in 3 years' time to reduce it to 18 or increase it to 32. You know, those details can always change subject to the Parliament's actions in creating laws.
Dan?
You're conflating the creation of legislation with the adoption of a constitutional referendum.
So, Noel... So, Noel, can I ask you why you thought it would be a much
Because
better
I thought
idea?
it might buck you guys up.
How do you
Remember?
mean?
Well, we had 2 years of co-design with Calma and Langton.
Yes.
Ken Wyatt supervised a process. Reports were provided to Cabinet by Ken.
Yes.
And we had a year of sitting around in that last year of the Morrison government. And I thought, well, you know, to buck you guys along, maybe we should be working on a bill. But any bill that would have been created would just be a model, just a proposal. The only real voice is the one passed by the Parliament. And we'd have to get through Senator Hanson, the Greens, everybody, LNP would have a role in there. The problem, what you guys have been doing over the last 6 months or 8 months, you guys have been disavowing your responsibility in creating the detail. You've got the power to legislate here.
Dan Tehan, I want you to respond before I go to the next question.
Yeah.
It is true that you do have some power as a parliamentarian to construct this thing, right?
Well, if it was a legislative voice, yes, there is some power. But what...
No, that's not technically true. We have to talk to facts
I think
here.
we are talking to...
No, the Constitution creates it and then the Parliament legislates it.
Yes, yes. So, but once it's in the Constitution, it cannot be changed, or to change it, you have to go to a referendum.
Oh my goodness.
No, that's not true.
It is true. Well,
It's
how
not true.
So once you're saying that once the voice is enshrined in the Constitution, that if it were to change that, we wouldn't have to go to another referendum.
You can change the voice. You wouldn't be able to abolish it, right?
No, we wouldn't be able to abolish it. And because Noel talks about the legal experts. Now, one of the things about getting true bipartisanship and where referendums have been very successful is where there is absolutely no legal doubt. Yet there are very learned legal opinions which say that there is legal issues with enshrining the voice in the Constitution, because the type of representations that need to be made or would be made ultimately in the end might need to be appealed to the High Court. So you do have that sense of legal risk.
Okay.
Now, this is important, because if we had have dealt with legal risk properly through bipartisanship, we wouldn't be where we are. And these are the two mistakes which have been made.
But
and
your
that's
Shadow
the
Attorney General,
problem.
your previous Shadow Attorney General and Indigenous Affairs Minister, Julian Leeser, obviously did not agree with that, because he stepped down and supported this.
Well, but Julian offered in a very bipartisan way suggestions of changes which could have been made, which would have improved it and taken that legal risk away. And those changes weren't taken up by the government.
Okay.
And that's why we are where we are.
All right,
and and it's that bipartisanship and taking legal risk out which is so important.
Dan, I think you misunderstand the difference between the constitutional provision and the laws that are generated pursuant to it. You've got to separate the two things out. The constitutional provision can't be abolished, but the legislation can be chopped and changed for decades and
So let me
decades
clarify
to come.
before we go to our next question. If there was a change of government and Dan Tehan, the Liberal Party, wanted a different kind of voice, you could do that, right?
Completely.
Do you agree, Dan?
Well, you could, but it doesn't
You could.
take... You could change the legislation.
You just couldn't get rid of it.
No, you can't get rid of it.
No, but honestly, because I'm a stickler for facts, sorry, and I know this area well. You couldn't get rid of it, but you could change it.
The point is, though, that on whatever the legislation was and whatever form it took, you would still have to be able to make... you'd be allowed to make representations, and if those representations weren't made according to various groups, then what you would see is that being appealed to the High Court. And what you end up with is this legal risk and legal issues, and that is the problem.
All right. This gets us...